You got to have a high-level person that runs these jobs. And underneath them, you've got to have high-level subcontractors or none of this works.
Welcome to the Freedom Point Real Estate Podcast, where we talk about creating more time freedom through passive real estate investing. Passive investing in real estate challenges conventional investment wisdom. We are passionate about learning and sharing resources with others who are ready to transform their investing mindset. Quick disclaimer as always, I am not a CPA, I am not an attorney or a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, not telling you or anyone else what to do. The views and opinions expressed in these podcasts are provided for education and informational purposes only and are not necessarily the views of my employer, ADP. I'm glad you're here. Now let's dig in.
All right, welcome back, Freedom Point Podcast listeners. Thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. I'm so glad you're here with us again today. I have a great guest with me today, Brock Holliman. Brock, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your time and thank you for the tremendous value that I'm sure you're going to bring to the audience today. Just to give my audience a little bit of a background on Brock. Brock has been in real estate since 2011. Since that time, Brock has successfully completed, check this out, over $250 million worth of real estate transactions that include foreclosure auctions, property flips, wholesales, and now primarily new construction, build-to-rent product in various areas throughout the state of Florida. Brock, you've been around the block. Tell us a little bit more about your real estate investing journey, how you got started, maybe speak specifically about this transition from foreclosure auctions and property flips to now build to rent.
Yeah, sure. So if anybody's ever looked me up or anything, I know it might sound like a broken record with this story, but I started in high school in 2011. I had a lawn mowing business that would mow a lot of vacant property for banks. They had, that was like the real estate crash or the bubble pop or whatever, where there were so many vacant properties and the banks owned them all. And they were in enough pain that they were going to hire a 16, 17-year-old kid to go out and mow these properties. So that's where it started. And my father was in construction. So you can't have construction without real estate, right? So construction's worthless without the land. So he naturally wanted to push me into this. And he was like, hey, you should go check out these auctions, these foreclosure auctions. He had met a few people that were making money at the auctions at the time. I remember the first day I went to these auctions, I was on the courthouse steps. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I just wanted to be there, check it out, see what was going on, and see how to make some money. And my father, he had a court date that same day. And funny, he's walking up the steps and we make eye contact. He's like, aren't you supposed to be in school? I'm like, yeah. You told me to check this thing out. So anyways, check it out. He actually I was expecting him to get mad at me for skipping school. I remember the next few days, him calling his friends up and telling them the story about how he caught me at a foreclosure auction. And it was more like a sense of confirmation, like, okay, my dad's proud of me, so it made me feel good. I'm doing the right thing. And, little things led into this stuff. Obviously, with mowing lawns, you don't have enough cash because you need cash at these auctions to purchase the real estate. Didn't have enough cash to make any noise, even though I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, which is cheap as dirt. But I did, back then there were so many properties going for sale that the laws and the rules at these auctions were not like they are now. Now, like in Florida, if I want to buy some foreclosed property, it's going to be a public auction online. I'm going to have a deposit or cash in the escrow account before they even let me bid. And you have to prove that you're going to pay cash. And if you don't close and send the full amount within, I think it's 24 hours here, then you lose your 5% deposit. Back in the day, it was like a handshake agreement or let's write it on a napkin. I promise to pay you in the next 48 hours. And if you could sweet talk them, you could squeeze another 48 hours out of the deal, which is what I was doing on every property because I didn't have the money to pay them. And being young and not in the game at all with no connections, like it's not like I had an investor or a cash buyer list to go out and wholesale these deals to. So really, it was like get on public records, find out who's buying in these areas, filter by cash, because you could do that back then, even though tech was sort of in the early stages compared to now. And really just put together a list that way and cold call them, go to their office, whatever, let them know that, hey, I'm a guy that's going to bring you product that you like to buy at a better deal than you buy it at. But the problem is you're going to have to send money. We're going to have 24-hour, 48-hour closings. Like you don't have 30-day due diligence and contract and all this stuff. And the account that they're wiring the funds to at the time was right to the attorney or the trustee's account. And say I would win one for $11,000. I know that sounds crazy. $11,000 house. Say I sold it to Jim for 15. I would tell Jim, look, I got to have the 15. I'd give him the wiring instructions, which was the trustee's account, and then they within 30 days would mail me a check for the overage, even though they told me the final amount. That's just how it went. So that's really how it started, and just stacked as much as I could that way, and just step by step, the slow and boring process, which I've always found that works the best for me. Whenever I try to go, get rich quick is when I fall flat on my face or lose my money. So just one foot in front of the other. So from wholesaling the deal and just changing the locks to now we're rehabbing them to now, we're going to keep them for rentals. The first rental I kept was $7,200, rented for $650. Ended up selling it for $32,000 to an Australian investor. And this is why I got out of Memphis. I went back to Memphis a year or two later. They had put some different tenants in there. And I remember driving past the house. I'm like, I want to drive past my first rental. I remember driving past it. There was notices on the door. I said, let me read these. I go up there. The city of Memphis was putting it on the list to get demolished because of a meth lab that the new tenants were running in there. And, I just wanted to get the hell away from that stuff because, Memphis, I love cash flow, and it's got extremely sexy numbers for returns and cash flow. But when you really start to dig in and experience what you deal with there, tenant base and just the quality of life that city offers, it doesn't bring you the best opportunities for your investments to succeed. So I wanted to get out of there and go to a place where I knew that I felt more comfortable, which was Florida. And there's a few chapters in between. I moved to New York City, I moved to Washington, D.C., and various different places, North Carolina, and experimented all along the way. But, short pitch, went from that to down to Florida, where now we run a build to rent operation. And, we do north of $50 million worth of builds a year. And I try to keep as many of them as possible. I'm super addicted to the rental game. So,
well, this is a remarkable story, Brock, for a lot of different levels, outside of the fact that I used to also be, in the single family, fix and flip, business. And it's interesting that you you were making cash basically wholesaling when you were in high school, which is remarkable. I mean, I think of the kids that, I know that would kind of, ditch school for the day. They would ditch school and go to the local convenience store to grab a snack and a soda. And you were hightailing it, over to the foreclosure auction.
And Jeremy, to be fair, I had my days of, I had my days of pulling behind a Super 8 motel and taking a nap. Okay. No, for sure. That definitely helped me. I was hungry for the money and the real estate. I loved it, from the get go. So,
yeah. Well, so we've got past the kind of the early stage, of your real estate investing journey. Let's maybe kind of fast forward to what you've been up to, with respect to the build to rent space. I know sometimes with investors, it gets a little bit of a bad rap because build to rent, oftentimes when you're investing, it takes a while for these, ground up developments to start cash flowing. And at the very early, onset of these investments, there's not a lot of tax depreciation involved because it's just the dirt, right? So let's talk a little bit more about, kind of what you're up to in that space and what you found to be, kind of the secret sauce in investing in build to rent.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on some awesome points there. So yeah, first of all, bad rep as far as no cash flow and new construction, definitely 99% of the cases, totally right, totally accurate. I'm very picky in the areas that we go in. First and foremost, the area's got to match, some demographic and check those boxes off. We got to have growing population. We've got to have a hot market where people are moving to, with jobs that are growing, with good income, and all these different things. And then on top of that, yeah, we've got a cash flow, which that's the most difficult part, especially the last 2-3 years, because rents have been very flat after a high run up, and rates have been increasing, and prices have not come down. So it's like a recipe for no cash flow, which has definitely it's been a challenge. But at the same time, we adjust our models to make it make sense. So we've got and how do we do that? I mean, when we sell to investors, which I'm sure I've mentioned it already, okay, but I'm addicted to the rentals. If it was up to me, I'd keep every one of them that we build, but we're not we're not rich enough to do that. So we have to create some income, and we do that by selling off to other investors. We could sell retail and make, probably an extra 7%. Now it's probably like a 10% markup for retail versus our investors, but there's also going to be more closing costs, some commissions, just other things that you're not making a true 10% more. On top of that, when we've got a retail buyer that moves in, they're going to buy that house, they're going to move in, they're going to love the house, and they're going to stay there for probably 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, or until they die. You never know. So you've got a one-time client when you do that. On the other side, the investor side, we're dealing with a type of clientele that is not going to go run up their credit card before closing and buy the furniture before they move in and then lose the loan. We're dealing with a client that, as long as we do the right thing and we treat their investment with respect and them with respect, then they're definitely going to come back, because if we're managing their investment properly, it's going to perform the way that we said it would. Markets can obviously throw a thing in that, but it's going to perform as best as it possibly can. And when that happens, every client will be back because they're making money. And when they're making money, they want to reinvest and do more with it. So we're okay with taking that 7% profit hit by going with the repeat clients that speak the same language that I do.
So let me understand. Let me interrupt you for a minute. Let me understand the strategy. So the strategy is to locate a piece of dirt, right? Where you can either, on speculation, you can build a single family home, or perhaps maybe you're finding a piece of dirt that can be, zoned and parceled out into multiple different, property locations, right? And you're primarily looking to build spec homes on spec, right? And then looking
it's
to
100% on spec.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have to do that, but at the same time, building, and I know you mentioned how slow it is to build, and that really makes cash flow hurt too. I'd love to touch on that, because I promise you, there's no way anybody is as efficient as we are. Our average build time in Central Florida is at 67 days, 68 days. And then our average, and this is with, we're not building 2 or 5 a year, and we're not building 5,000 a year either, to be frank. Okay. But we're built between 100 to 200 a year. This year, hopefully we go 200 to 300. But to do that on scale, typically your build time increases. But we've got incredible processes that help that out, because every day that house is being constructed and it's not earning income, it's hurting the investor, which I look at myself as an investor, not so much a builder, even though we build, because I love the investment, the number side. But yeah, so man, I'm sorry. So Beck, what would you say? I just
No, this is great. Yeah, I appreciate it. You kind of answered the question there. So let me ask another kind of question then, and that would be, are you primarily using, senior lender, note type debt to acquire, the land and to, finance the construction costs, or are you looking to partner with outside limited partner investors through like a syndication model or a joint, venture? And then with that, what can the investor typically, look at from a return perspective, on the capital that they choose to invest? And then does that capital recycle then? Because you mentioned that it only takes 66 to 68 days, to get in and to get out. So what's kind of the overall strategy, from an investor's perspective?
Yes. So it's definitely on my list to raise funds to be able to do this. Right now, it is 100% either my own money or our own money as far as a company goes. The income that the rentals produce goes straight back into it, which it all the money, even though it's shared by three different companies, it all kind of flows back into the same spot. We buy every lot at, well, 99%. We've got some investors that own lots and that hire us to build on their lot, and we'll do that. But 99% of our deals are, we use our own capital, we buy the land, and then we have a very short list of private money lenders that'll either come in and do just a promissory note and lend the money up front, and they trust us enough to not go through a draw schedule. They'll actually just send us the full amount for whatever project we're building, and we operate with that, which really opens the door up a little bit. Since there's trust there and that they allow that to happen, it allows us to expand a little bit more rapidly than we could if it weren't that case. But the most typical scenarios, we use our cash, we buy a lot, and then we use some of these commercial lenders that will do a construction loan on it. So they'll do a construction loan, then our CRM or our system will then let our accounting people know, hey, this house is at this stage once we update our systems, and it's time to request a draw from lender A. And then they submit the draw request, they send us the cash, we keep going just as fast as we can. The fact that we build them that fast definitely allows us to build a whole lot more properties with our money, our small amount of capital, compared to these other large companies that can go out there and, work a deal with a developer and take down 400 lots at one time. We are, it's more like we run out, we sell out, or we refinance out, and we've got to reload same day, and these areas that we're in, we won't go there if we can build 50 houses and we're done. We need to go there, and if we know that there's a long timeline that we can build hundreds of these things and actually set up shop, because the overhead that has to deal with this, if you want to be that efficient on the building side, is extremely expensive. And you'll never make your overhead back in a low volume type of situation. So that, we got to make sure that happens. And then all these other financial sides will check off, and it rolls very smooth.
Yeah. Brock, let's talk a little bit more about to that potential investor that's listening to this podcast episode today, that's considering, investing in the build to rent space on an active level, where maybe they convince a farmer owner to sell a portion of their property, or they happen to, locate a piece of land that could easily support maybe one or two, single family homes. Because you've been in this business a while, what type of advice would you give, that individual that's looking to, invest actively in their own build to rent strategy?
I would make sure that I've got good lenders involved. That's a gimme. I think the biggest thing to look out for is you got to know what you're doing, or have somebody that knows what they're doing on the construction side on your team. Because if you rely on just contractors that you met off online or just anywhere, it's about the most crooked business or lane that you'd ever hear. Or maybe not crooked, maybe that's a good word for it. Liars or exaggerators, or you'll get hit with an escalation clause. We've got so many clients right now that we're going to be building for that have been hit with escalation clauses, and they didn't even know that existed in their contracts. And you got to have a high level person that runs these jobs, and underneath them you've got to have high level subcontractors that they can point their finger and they can trust, or none of this works. None of this works. You're going to get a bad quality product. You're going to have budget costs that get way overrun. You're going to have a schedule that is never ending, and you're never going to cash flow. And then the worst thing that could ever happen to any real estate investor or anybody in the space is that you have a bad deal, especially on your first deal. because real estate allows people, like me, and I don't know your education background. You seem very educated. I barely got out of high school. It allows people like me to look very smart, intelligent, and to succeed in the real world, and really make something financially that you can be proud of. Real estate can. And if you have a bad taste in your mouth and you don't have the opportunity, or you just X that out of your future, it's about the worst thing that could happen to anybody. So
Yeah. Well, Brock, I really appreciate you saying that you think I look smart. Hopefully I am really smart, but
well, I didn't mean to look. Okay, I meant
I'm just
you
kidding.
are.
No, that was good. So let me ask you another question, Brock. What's next for you? What's 2024 look like for Brock in terms of what your personal or professional goals are?
Yeah. So 2024, it's one of those years. It's one of these years that's got a big question mark on it, right? I mean, the economy, interest rates, everything. The only thing that I'm very, very confident in is that I don't see. Everybody talks about, it's a crash, or whatever. It's the end of the world. The data doesn't line up like it did in 2007 and 8. And I spend so much time, I'm either working or I'm studying, the events that interest me. And I like to study past events, and not that they're always going to repeat themselves, but they tend to rhyme a lot. This event it rhymes a lot with 07, 08, 09, with the fact that transactions have fallen off of a cliff. But back then, transactions fell off a cliff, and builders were producing a record supply of housing, and people were not paying their payments, and people were downsizing, and all this hit at one time. That's not the case now. So it gives me more confidence. Last year, I was a little timid. We could have done a hell of a lot more as a company. This year, we're going to make up for what we did not do last year. I'm really looking out, 25, 26, 27. I think something's going on in the commercial space with a lot of people that were inexperienced operators that did a lot of syndication deals with bad debt, and debt that they didn't do any rate locks or whatever, and something might happen and blow their deal into pieces. I see something happen with that, as a lot of people in our space might, to the point where stimulus might come. Somebody's going to have to intervene, the Fed, somebody. And I think when that happens, the residential space sort of stays flat. I don't see much happening to that. We're going to keep moving and grooving, and I'm going to keep as many as we can during this time. And no, I don't expect them all to cash flow like they did in 2018, 19, and 20. It just won't happen. But if we add enough time to the equation and we continue to do what we've been doing, then things will explode. I think when you add the stimulus in for whatever is going to happen in the commercial space, it will trickle down, and rents will, I think they will go back through the roof. I'm not underwriting anything for this year or next year with any rent increases. And I'm telling all of my investors the same thing. And to make the deals work for them where they can make sense of them today, we're offering free property because we own the property management company. We're giving them free property management for the first couple of years. And then I'm doing a rent gap credit to the highest market rent that I've gotten in these areas over the last 18 months. So I'm covering the difference until this time comes. And I really do think it's coming. I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I'm betting on it. So,
well, certainly a good time in history, Brock, to have a little bit of dry powder, on the side for those types of opportunities. And, everybody seems to have their own, version of their crystal ball. Mine might look different than yours, and, yours might look different than 100 other individuals. So the good news is we know that real estate will appreciate over time. It always does, right? And there are opportunities in all various stages of the economic cycle to acquire real estate. Certainly there are times that are better than others, obviously, but yeah, I really appreciate your kind of perspective on the build to rent space. Really appreciate your perspective on kind of the overall strategy, that you guys deploy. It sounds like you've got a fantastic team. What would be maybe one or two different ways our listening audience can connect with you to learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah. So I would love if anybody that's listening right now, if they want to see the kind of product that we're building, please go to mynewrental.com. That's our property management company. And you can just check out our project gallery or the models that we have, or even the available rental inventory. and just see what we do that's different, because we
Sure.
we put our own touch on it. I mean, I'm a younger guy. I love style. I love, modern type finishes and standing out against the competition. And we truly do that. It helps unit turnover cost. It helps tenants want to move there faster and pay more and stay longer and take care of the property longer or better. So yeah, please go to mynewrental.com and check that out. And as far as getting in contact with me personally, I'm trying a lot, my best to juggle what we've got going on, along with trying to get our social media going on and a better web presence. But I am active on Instagram a lot, and Facebook and YouTube and in bigger pockets too. My handle on that is @follow.brock. So @follow.brock, my first name. So yeah, please come on, give me a follow, shoot me a message, shoot me a DM. I'd love to answer any questions, no matter, free or whatever. I mean, I'm trying to help people seriously take the next step in this game. So,
Well, Brock, we really appreciate you being on the show with me today. Okay.
thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. And Freedom Point podcast listeners, thank you again for jumping into another episode of the Freedom Point. We look forward to having you join us on the next episode.
Thank you for hanging out with us today and for listening to the Freedom Point podcast, powered by Starting Point Capital. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on this show should be considered financial advice. Before making any financial decision, please consult with a professional. This show is copyrighted by the Freedom Point podcast. Written permissions must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting. If you're interested in connecting, you can find contact information at startingpointcapital.com.